Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Last session of the day, so we're going to keep the energy nice and high and start the action part of the session very soon. So welcome to this session. We're here talking about operationalizing new ways of working in the humanitarian sector, leveraging digital tools. I'm joined by colleagues in the room, colleagues online. Everybody wave to everybody online. They're up there. Hi. And a great panel today. So I'm joined again by Paul Machado, who is the Business Analytics and Research Coordinator with Hulo, the Humanitarian Logistics Cooperative. Also joined by Diego Vega, who's the Director of the Hulo Institute at the Hanken School of Economics. Thank you for joining us. Fabrice Perrault, who is the Logistics and IS Director with Solidarité Internationale. And Richard Neller, who is the Coordinator of Strategic Supply Chain for DG ECHO. We just about all fit on the table. And thank you very much for joining us today. So I've mentioned this thing called Hulo, just in case anybody in the room doesn't know what that is. I will quickly orientate you to what that is, if this works. Is it going? Okay.
I gotta change the. Gosh. One moment.
Oh, that's fine. So. Hulo is the first logistics cooperative in the sector, and it was formed several years ago, so it's still in its early infancy, and this is now our third time presenting progress at the HNPW for Hulo, which is exciting. It's about connecting stakeholders, so it's a cooperative which is formed by NGOs and for NGOs, and was created by 9 humanitarian organizations, some of whom we have in the room today, in June 2021. This was off the back of a number of pieces of research. So it's no coincidence that we have research partners today on the panel. It's been something that's very imperative to Hulo to partner and to conduct research from the early days. But even before Hulo was founded, the Réseau Logistique Humanitaire and research partnerships with the logistics cluster as well produced a number of papers to try and raise attention to the fact of how much money is going through the supply chain in humanitarian response and the opportunities to work more effectively and more collaboratively together. So off the back of this research, the chief execs, annoying as they sometimes are for many of our organizations, said, fine, prove it. Show us the value proposition, if you like, in commercial terms, of an organization or of a structure that is a more formal, collaborative and cooperative mechanism. So the fourth paper shown there on screen was all about that, was all about taking the financials and the data of 5 years of supply chain information from NGOs, which you can just imagine what clean and lovely state that was in, putting that together and trying to make a financial case for collaboration. Then beyond that, it was also about trying to define how we would work together as organizations. We at best coordinate in humanitarian response, but we're not much better at doing formal collaboration. So we really needed to find the mechanism and the governance structure that was going to work effectively and help this cooperative get off to a good start. And that's when a cooperative was indeed the model that was landed on. So all of the members of Hulo and the founding members and the additional members who've joined since are all formally bought in and help to govern and drive the activities of the cooperative. They may not join every cooperative activity in every country, but they have to give and take from the cooperative. It's really in essence the design of the entity. It's supported by DG ECHO, by the French government, the CDCS, and by the US government, the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. And as I say, it's 3 years in the making, and we're here today to talk a little bit about how digital tools have helped Hulo to collaborate better, but also bringing in the role of digital transformation and digital tools more broadly in the sector. So this is not a session that's just talking about Hulo's tools. This is really about trying to explore together what does digital transformation mean for us as a sector, and how can we leverage this better? We've been talking about this for a while, so why can't we get it done? And why can't we get that digital transformation going faster? So on that basis, I'm going to hand over. I'm just going to whiz through a couple of slides that most of you have seen before. So one of the challenges, I'll stop on this one. One of the challenges with working together is data sharing. And we touched on this a little bit in the session earlier this afternoon, for those of you here. For some reason, as NGOs and in the NGO community, we're quite uncomfortable to share our data. And it's taken quite a big journey to get to the point where everybody is willing to share data, to bring something to the table, and to exchange data to be able to conduct better analysis and to make more data-driven decisions. But the results of that we know are that we can then move on to the next slide, maybe. That we can then form better analysis and make better decisions. So we know that we're very data rich in this sector as a whole and analysis poor. So one of the things that we want to explore today and in our first part of this session is the role of data in the collaborative environment. So with that, I'm going to hand to Paul Machado and just give you a bit more of an introduction. So Paul is a humanitarian supply chain and logistics expert with more than 15 years experience. He's the business analytics and research coordinator for Hulo for the cooperative, and he oversees all the activities related to monitoring, evaluation, business analytics and operations research. So Paul, I'm going to come straight to you then. What do you see as the role of data in joint initiatives, and how important is this for your work?
Okay, so thank you so much. Data in joint initiative. In fact, to select, we have a local engagement committee on the field on our proof of concept missions, and to be able to support them to select the right joint initiatives they are interested, their needs, to create this joint initiative, which is could be a joint procurement initiative, joint environmental initiative, joint HR initiative. They need data. Why? Hulo, it's a cooperative, meaning that there is a lot of stakeholders around the table. Everyone knows what he's doing, where is what is his need, but no one has a global overview. So that's why my department, we collect their data and we are able to provide them insight about the global overview. Okay, in this context, you are 9 members. We can have even other participants that share their data. And thanks to that, we are able to provide them intelligence, insight, to support them in their decision makings, because the data doesn't take decision in place of you, of course. Help you to take the best decision at the right time. That since the creation of Hulo is very interesting, that even if it was not a cooperative dedicated for data management or digitalization, data was all the time on the table. We need data to take the right decision because we are so many stakeholders and we have to take data-driven decision. And we need data of quality. And that's why this data exchange become a little bit the cement within the cooperative. We drive a lot of decision, but also oblige a little bit, support all the stakeholder, member and participant to exchange their data and to have a kind of good ground to start discussion, to challenge themselves, but to have a kind of global overview. That's why to run and even to follow up the joint initiatives, there is a huge process of data exchange because we want to be transparent. And when you become a participant of a Hulo cooperative, not only a member, if you participate, we provide you a dedicated business intelligence space where you can have access to all the data you are shared with Hulo. You are the only one to have access to it, of course. You can see all the running activity. If you are involved in a joint procurement initiative, you share your purchase order, and we have some dashboard where you can follow your savings in real time. You can report to your hierarchy, etc. Really, data sharing becomes the cement of our joint initiative. And the last and not the least, is not, again, like we say, it's not in the DNA of the organization to share data because you require, I share the data so I can be judged. And we try with a lot of advocacy, patience, to explain that I'm not here to audit you. I'm not just here to treat your data, to provide you insight for you as a practitioner to take the best decision. And that's why we created one of the first document we created after the performance and impact measurement framework was the data governance policy. So we developed an entire kit in order to create a trustful environment with MOU, with non-disclosure agreement, and dedicated business analytic platform where all the participants can see the data they have shared and what we are doing with it, and knowing that we are totally GDPR compliant and all the data are really encrypted, separated in secure database, acted doesn't see the data of solidarity, etc. And each one at different level of security can see a scope of data like the accounting data or the GI, depending on what country you are with, etc. So first, we had to create this trustful environment and ecosystem to ease the exchange of data sharing to support all the joint initiative process. Yeah.
Caught me off guard there. That's fine. Okay, so how did you develop? I mean, what are the comparators in the sector? What did you look at elsewhere in the sector to try and develop this model of data governance and data collection? Because this isn't the first time that we talk about data sharing.
Yeah. In fact, let me come back to the creation of Hulo. Which is a very interesting story about digitalization state among humanitarian action. Imagine a few years ago, 9 logistic directors meet and were brainstorming about pooling resources, creating a kind of cooperative, a platform to pool resources. And everyone knew what was doing his organization and where, but no one had the global overview among 9 organizations. So what do they did? Well, they wanted first, again, a global overview, and they realized, some of them, not all, that they were not able to gather the supply chain logistic data because a lot of NGO didn't digitalize really 100% their supply chain and logistic. Some are still working with Excel, and some have information system, but not designed properly for their supply chains management. Then they went to the only department who really, since decades, years and decades, have really digitalized the way of working, finance department. They have accounting systems since years and decades. So what is interesting, so 9 logistic directors gather and ask to their finance department to gather all this accounting data related to supply chain and logistic expenditure, which was already an achievement by itself because it was never done before. And based on this data, they were able to build some business model, to do some simulation, to see about the sustainability of the project and the opportunities. And this data, in fact, it was a one-shot analytics and project, and now is becoming a running activity, is a part of my department that every year we collect the accounting data of all the members, and we are able to update our business intelligence ecosystem and to provide a global overview who is where, and broadly speaking, who is doing what where, in order to provide some model and to save time in terms of decision making to the top management again.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Paul. We'll come back to you for some questions at the end. I'm going to move on to my second panelist today, Diego Vega. Dr. Diego Vega is Associate Professor of Supply Chain Management and Social Responsibility, in particular Humanitarian Logistics at the Hanken School of Economics in Finland, and Director of the Hulo Institute. He has over 10 years' experience in conducting research in humanitarian logistics with and for international humanitarian organizations, and is the Associate Editor of the Journal of Humanitarian Logistics and Supply Chain Management. Finally, Diego is also the recipient of the 2023 American Logistics Aid Network Award for Research and Academic Contribution. So, Diego, we all need the same systems. Is that the answer?
Yes and no. Thanks you, Rebecca, and thanks, Paul, for that introduction. As it is the same case from Paul's perspective to have an overview of the systems and which organization is doing what. It was also since, I don't know, 2008 or 10, the push or the idea or the need to be able to talk to other organizations in this so-called interoperability. It happens internally in NGOs, but also with others. And there was no, until now, there was no way of talking to other organizations. So with that idea, we supported NetHope to build what is called now the Frontline Humanitarian Logistics Initiative, which is a standard data. It doesn't mean it's the solution. It's just a language common to all NGOs, so they can basically exchange the data. So we're not only gathering the data, but also being able to talk to each other. And maybe in some organizations, some processes or tasks have different names, but they mean the same thing. And in systems, they need to talk the same language. So that's what we did, a very standard process that I can go through details in our next session on Wednesday. So don't worry, I will show you just some examples. We usually focus on basic supply chain processes that everyone has. And there's a very common standard model called SCORE that most of you should know, but it's not enough to be only moving it to the humanitarian sector. So we needed to find a way to adapt it or tailor it to the sector. In addition to that, as many of you know, all organizations are unique. They have specific ways of doing things because most organizations have built their own ERPs on their own, just basically answering to their own needs. So we also needed to include that. So that's what we did. This is the Frontline. It's an open source, so you can just Google it and you'll find all the information. But the thing does not stop there. The idea is that we put this standard in use, right? So last year we started this new exercise to try to understand or assess the compliance of that standard with any specific system, in this case, Link, supported by Hulo. And then we thought, okay, let's check if what we came up with from the academic perspective, of course, using input from NGOs, actually works. So we came up with this grid to understand how far is Link, the current version of Link, to what the standard is. And again, just to remind you, the idea is not to be 100% compliant, is to understand where are we and what do different organizations need to be compliant in. There is one specific process that I'll show you, for instance, that has a very low level of compliance: services, because not everyone buys services or works, and it's okay. Not everyone needs to have that module of process services or procurement of services, and it's fine. But if you need it, you can have it, and then talk to other organizations that do the same, and maybe you can share services. So again, the idea is not to push everyone to get that to that level of compliance, but also only, to talk to each other. And just to go through some examples, very simple things. Planning, for instance, is lacking in most ERPs, and it's fine. Not everyone needs planning, or not everyone includes planning in supply chain management or within the supply chain department, which is completely fine, but it comes from SCORE, so it should be there. Things like procurement are very simple, so everyone does procurement very, very well, so that's compliant. It is no issue there. You can basically do joint procurement without any problem with almost any organization. But then when we get into more details, talking about services, talking about works, procuring works or services, that is not something for everyone, or even kitting. That's something that not all NGOs do. So that's something that could be adapted or included, but it's not mandatory to include it. And in this case, for instance, when we talk about transportation, there are different ways of transporting, or different ways of calling the same things. So a lot of those exercises are just tweaking, in a way, the way the system works, so that it's just compliant and you can just work with other organizations and share transportation, or just loan or share different resources. And the whole point of this exercise that we're doing with Link now is to go for quick wins, not to change the entire system, not to change the way the system works, but also to find what are the main keys that could be leveraged to be able to talk to each other. And ideally, if we go into detail, the Frontline Humanitarian Logistics Initiative can work with Link, but if any other system like Nodos or anyone else wants to have the same standard, those organizations that work with Nodos could also work and talk to Link organizations. And the idea is that all the sector manages to talk to each other, not entirely. And of course, we go through security of data, etc. But it's just conversation, basically, just to share and be able to be interoperable. That's from now.
And just to stay with that for a second before you turn your mic off. So what does that mean in practice? If organizations want to collaborate together, how does the FHL help them? Is it like the DeepL of our logistics marketplace, or what does it do?
So the potential is very big. And again, this is just the starting of the front line. One of the things that we saw during the first exercise was with different organizations is just understanding how things work internally, how warehousing works. And if NGO A talks the same language as NGO B, they could both know that in that same country they have the same type of product, for instance, just by that. Or understanding that the different processes are aligned, so they could maybe joint procurement, join forces, pool resources, and just have the ability to, in a way, divide that joint effort in their own ERPs and to make accountability of that. There's also a need, and maybe Richard will talk about that later. We saw the need or the push from organizations to be able to have some joint funding, but currently ERPs do not allow for that. With the frontline, it is possible to do that, to have joint funding and then be able to separate it and allocate to specific organizations because they have the same language. Again, the idea of it is just to put a base to whatever it's possible, and then the possibilities are endless. If we think a bit outside the box, I hate that phrase, but it's the best example. Other systems could also use the same data standard, like marketplaces, like, I don't know, ESOPs or any other example that use the same language. So everyone could use and talk the same language at the data level. And then the processes, of course, it will be built basically custom based for each organization.
So what's coming next? You mentioned this is in the early stages. What's the next stages on the project?
The next stage for now is to develop or try to understand which are those quick wins, where specifically with Link, what are the things that we could now change or tweak or develop so that it becomes compliant with FHL. But after that, the idea is also to improve FHL. This is just the first version. So maybe gather other organizations' perspective and experiences to see what is missing, what else should be done. And then the latest one is just ideas that we have had in the past months is try to expand it to other services, other tools, online marketplaces, logistics, data exchange, anything that could just talk the same language, basically. And even, of course, this is more of a dreaming thing, but be able to have interfaces with systems like SAP or Microsoft, that they have other languages, but that somehow manage to talk to those organizations as well.
That sounds super interesting, and also I'm really glad I'm not on that project team. For the Microsoft Dynamics and SAP integration, not more broadly.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll come back to you with some questions at the end, but I want to introduce our next panelist today, Fabrice Perrault, who is the Director of Logistics and IS at Solidarité International, and has been with Solidarité since 2010, heading up logistics since 2014. You're one of the founding members of Hulo. I heard someone describe you earlier as having many hats. I'm not sure how much room you have for more hats now, but you're also, since 2021, the president of Hulo. So thank you for joining us today. I wanted to take a look at another example of how digital tools are helping us to change our ways of working. So tell us about this solution that you've been advocating for and why it's useful to you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you, Rebecca. So today what I'm going to talk about is what we call shared resources, which is a Hulo new baby. We are pretty proud of showing that to you today. Coordination of shared resources so far, or in the past, is not something very new. We always tried to collaborate. But to do so, we've been communicating mostly one-to-one, face-to-face, and based on individual relationships. Then we've moved to a more 2.0 version of communicating through WhatsApp groups, email distribution list. Nothing very innovative, but that was the way of working, but it was still based on individual relationship or collaboration. And what we wanted to focus on with Hulo is a new tool that will allow organization to take one step further and come together in a marketplace, a common marketplace, in real time, much more efficient to exchange and to pool resources. And this is what you see on the right part of the screen. So maybe as a reminder, why do we want to share resources? Maybe it's obvious, but it's always good to remind that we are looking for cost efficiencies, to reduce duplication, breaking down siloed activities, reduce waste, and we strongly believe that everything that we are doing when we are pooling resources can have a strong impact on the environmental footprint. And this is where we created the app. So the app is a mobile app which is secure and that offers a marketplace where organizations can publish their sharing requests or offers. Practically speaking, I am Solidarité. I'm in Central African Republic. I'm renting a warehouse, which is a bit too big for me, and I have half of it, which is free. Okay, then I have the opportunity with the app to post an offer saying, whatever, 1,000 square meters are available to share. And this offer will be published to the app to all users. And any organization who is willing to share with me will raise his hand, and then we'll start collaborating. The application is also giving practical advice and recommendation for how to pool resources with the expertise that Hulo has built along the years. And it offers also a messaging system so that users can communicate together without knowing each other, which is very important. The thing is that if you don't know each other, how can I know what you need? How can I know in what financial situation your organization is, on what kind of cost you need to reduce? And this is what we think this is the next way of working for pooling resources. So how does it work? Your organization will be onboarded onto the app. That means trained on the functionalities on how it works. It's open basically to all organizations. Private sector is excluded of it for obvious reason. The creation and management of users is done by the organization themselves. Okay, Hulo will not be managing the users. Organization has to know who will be in charge of the application. Will be 1 person, 2 person. That's not something Hulo will deal with. Then you post a request or you find an offer that meets your needs, or that's something, as I said, that you want to share. You communicate directly on the app. And then this is where the Hulo expertise intervenes. They will support you with the tools and advice to enable the collaboration. What does expertise mean? It's easy to say, I want to share a warehouse. Okay, that's obvious. Everyone knows why we do that. But how to do it? What will the finance say? What will the legal department in HQ say? What kind of MOU do I need to sign? What is cost recovery? How does that work? How will I invoice the other organization? To be honest, it's really difficult. It's not something that we are using what we do on a regular basis. And by experience, it's always difficult to find the right way to do. But Hulo has experienced that already many times and has the right expertise to help organization to make it real. So with the help of Hulo, you come to an agreement. Hopefully you share what you need to share in terms of resources. And then what we'll ask from the organization is to share the feedback on how it worked. What were the constraints? What were the challenges? Does it work in terms of cost reduction and so on? Because we want to, that's kind of a lessons learned. We want to have embedded into the application. Who is it for? Actually, that's for any organization, okay? The app is basically open to anyone, from local NGO to, moves alone, surprised. From local NGO to international NGO. What's important there with this application available through a mobile phone is that it will not be available only where Hulo is present in a country. Hulo is present in 6 countries today, that you can see here. But with the app, it will be available basically wherever the needs are. Okay, that's the main principle. You have to keep in mind that having a Hulo team on ground is something that is costly. We don't want to have too heavy structure for Hulo project. Resourcing pooling can happen without a strong human presence. Only with digital help, digital connection, we truly believe that it can work. And that's the main idea of this new application. Now, from my perspective, and taking off one hat, the president of Hulo, and putting on the Solidarité one, how do I see the implementation in my own organization? Actually, I was in Central African Republic 2 weeks ago. everyone is struggling with funding there. Okay, the funding gap is massive. Money is not available anymore, so we are all looking for ways of funding our structure cost, our support cost, and we are all thinking about what can I share. The reflex is there. What can I share? But practically speaking, I was there 2 weeks ago. Solidarité, I know that we want to share an office. I know that we want to share a guest house. But who do I talk to? It's not as easy as taking your phone and calling another country director and say, hey, do you want to share? No, that's not as easy as it is. And if I look back 2 weeks ago and if I had the app, this is what I would have been doing, putting a request on the app saying, okay, Solidarité is willing to share a guest house with 1, 2, or 3 or more organizations. Who wants to share it with me? And to me, that's kind of the future for this, especially for this underfunded crisis. Yeah. But digital tools, it's not magic, right? As it was mentioned in the previous Hulo session, having organization on board on Hulo activities, it's not that easy. It's a big challenge because internally, you have to push from HQ to the field for making people understand what the added value of Hulo. You have to push for, yeah, you need to take time now to think about what you can pull so you can save time later. In context of emergency, it's very difficult to find the time to do it. So the tool will not be the magical solution for resources pooling. It will need a strong investment or strong implication, engagement, commitment of the organization to spread the message of resources pooling is the only right way to save money, to be able to maintain our response capacity. And this is, I think, the challenge for us, for organization for the next coming years.
Thank you. I mean, I like the idea. It sounds like it's the first thing that you open when you enter into a crisis, that this could be something that really helps us to work together. Do you see this as being something which helps level the playing field a little bit as well when we talk about local organizations, international organizations? Up to now, it's been quite a closed group or a hard group to access to share resources. Do you think that's something that could help on the localization agenda as well?
Yeah, hopefully the app it's gonna be a tool for anyone. I think that's the most important thing, that it's not based on bilateral relationship. It's based to anyone. So your local organization, your national, international organization, whatever, you are allowed to post or to request something. You have access to the wide humanitarian community without knowing the people. So you don't need to participate in the cluster meeting, in the CCOs, in the NGO organization committee, and so on, to be able to have access to the information. So for me, that's a big game changer for any organization. Yeah.
Thanks, Fabrice. We're going to come back to you for some questions later. I'm going to ask you to scooch along as we've kicked our donor representative off the end of the table. Sorry about that, Richard. There we go, perfect. So just to introduce you again, so Richard Neller has worked for DG ECHO for 11 years. He's currently working on the implementation of the humanitarian logistics policy, which if you haven't read it, please do. It's a great document and a great piece of work that's had a lot of collaboration behind it. And that supports a more coordinated, more strategic approach to the humanitarian supply chain across the humanitarian community. Richard started his working life in the UK Transport Ministry, working on international maritime law. I have boats for you later, so that will work well. And then seconded to ECHO's Emergency Response Coordination Centre, so helping to coordinate civil protection response, and he's really passionate about the role that a more collaborative and strategic approach in supply chain can play in reducing that funding gap that we keep coming back to and improving aid delivery. Often these sessions will start now with someone asking you from a donor perspective. So that's what I'd like to do now, please. I know that ECHO has been supporting digital transformation initiatives and collaboration initiatives for a very long time and really leading the charge. We've mentioned Hulo and the support that you've given to Hulo, but it's much beyond that. So how does this fit into ECHO's agenda, and what's your perspective on the role of digital tools?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It's interesting because very kindly say that we've been supporting in this area for a number of years, which in some aspects is true. But I think it's kind of telling that it's only really maybe over the last 6 months that we've really been thinking about digitalization, sorry, in more depth from my team. So I am coordinator for strategic supply chain. We have a colleague who works on digitalization policy, and actually stepping back a bit and taking then the kind of broader frame, as we do sometimes as donors. When we talk about digitalization, and we have a policy framework on digitalization, a DG ECHO framework policy, and if you take a look at it, it talks about registration in refugee centres. It talks about e-learning courses. It talks about cash apps. So, and the name of this session is digital tools, actually. So it's interesting because immediately we're talking about the supply chain, but there's a much broader conversation to be had about, well, you know, what do we mean when we say digitalization? And I think it's, again, telling that we go straight to the supply chain, because this is kind of the journey that DG ECHO has been on. So for several years now, we've been supporting, looking at the supply chain from a more strategic perspective, because partners such as the members of Hulo and Hulo themselves came to us, approached us and said, well, if the whole supply chain is 60 to 80% of all the funding that is spent on humanitarian aid, and there are plenty of studies that back this up, and if procurement is 75% of that, and you know, you have this opportunity to use this very concrete delivery system, because this is what it is, that has places where you can input standards on greening, where you can implement policy on localization, and so on. So you have both at the same time something very concrete and something that you can feed all these policy areas into. Then why wouldn't you use that as a lens to look at what we're doing? So this is more and more what we're doing, where we're kind of using it as a lens. And to get back to what I was saying at the beginning, over the last 6 months, we've realized, well, the supply chain, broad reaching as it is, if you don't know what's happening, if you can't see what's happening, then actually then you know, you can't fully utilize this opportunity. So I would say, again, you know, this is kind of a bit the journey we've been on, and then trying to understand a bit better what the state of play is, so where different organizations sit in terms of how much they've managed to digitalize. And then you get into some very interesting conversations about the way organizations are set up in terms of funding. Is it central? Is it more disseminated, you know, through different countries? And then where does the pot of money come from to actually digitalize and support this kind of large investment? I think generally, you know, it's a significant investment. And then how do you make the arguments that, well, the return on this is going to be so good, and it's going to be able to improve aid diversion because you have more sight where things are going, and plus, you know, all the other things that you can get. But then at the same time, DG ECHO, for example, is saying that the indirect costs need to be reduced, that the country support costs need to be reduced. So, you know, where is this going to be coming from? And we had a session at the European Humanitarian Forum this year in March, where we've been trying to get this to the leadership level, because I think it's really at this level where the conversations need to happen. And there you had David Miliband asking the same question, saying, okay, where is this funding going to go from? We do need to digitalize. And when I sit and I listen to colleagues here, I hear these really concrete examples, and I've been in FHL meetings where I myself I have a little bit of knowledge, hopefully, on supply chain, and sometimes it's hard to follow, and you have to translate all these opportunities into the right language for this leadership who, you know, in a whole community where we've been seeing supply chain and digital tools, you know, so you have a double whammy of things that have been seen as back office functions. And then how do you translate this into things that can inspire the leadership to take it forward as a policy area? And we've had some success in this. I really encourage you, if you can go online and watch this discussion I just mentioned. The European Humanitarian Forum, is the videos on the website, no password or anything needed. But yeah, I mean, it was basically a call to action. Our Deputy Director General, Hans Das, also committed to following this up with a workshop to discuss this. And I think it might be good to actually come together as a community and be able to present to the leadership and say, well, if we all work together, we can achieve this. But this is kind of what needs to happen at the political strategic level. But there's not really a space for that at the moment. And we don't like, for good reasons, coming up with new spaces to have political and strategic discussions, because there's enough already. So it's about, well, where do we have that? So yeah, and then, I mean, it was interesting. I heard this comment on how the localization agenda is affected by this, and it's really interesting because, I mean, it's really difficult sometimes to make the comparison with the private sector. You have to be very careful. But I mean, the private sector in this instance has many very good solutions. I think we're in danger of getting further and further behind. And I mean, if a local organization in the private sector can benefit actually from these kinds of changes because they have adapted, I don't see why in the humanitarian community this cannot happen, why there's such a fear about this, because organizations like Hulo can actually put at the disposal of the community new tools that can be used to, for these smaller organizations to benefit from. So yeah, I think it's really kind of changing the mindset at many different levels, and it's happening with this kind of Hulo is one of these initiatives, and some others as well. But yeah, it's a big challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And maybe staying with you for a second. So it's, you mentioned, it's not cheap. So does that create a natural barrier to smaller organizations in participating and playing in this game, or is it the responsibility of the donor community and the larger humanitarian organizations to try and make sure that isn't a barrier?
I mean, it is and it shouldn't be, basically. So, I mean, I know that, for example, and I don't think I'm saying anything kind of confidential, big organizations like IFRC, when they've looked at the supply chain and procurement and so on, and the way national societies operate, actually, because you can free up resource by having certain tools at a kind of global level that they can draw upon, or regional cascading contracts and so on, they can actually then hopefully do more in a more consistent way with better knowledge and learning that's kind of behind it with more confidence. So yeah, I mean, it's about how you do it, I think.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because I think there's a level of standardization that challenges somewhat individualism. So it shouldn't, and it doesn't need to, but for some reason we take that idea of standardizing our approaches, standardizing our language, maybe even sometime down the road standardizing our ways of working and systems as being a degradation of the identity of the organization. And I think maybe that's back to that culture change piece that we talked about earlier as well today.
I think it's such a massive, complicated area, and it's really disingenuous to try to under-resource it when it can deliver so much. But we know that the IT departments of many organizations, they're firefighting all the time. They have their own battles. So for them to then come up with new and interesting initiatives on top of that, it's a big challenge. So yeah, it does ultimately come down to resource, but it's worth it, I think.
Thank you very much. So I've asked a couple of questions. I'm now going to open up to those in the room. If you have any questions for the panel today. Maxence, was that a question? Oh, perhaps I'll start. I'm going to ask one of the obvious ones that whenever we have a session at the moment about digitalization and data, we have to mention AI. Okay, that's the rules now. So what's the role of AI and machine learning in this space, in the digitalization of the sector over the next few years. And I'll let anyone wants to take that. Maybe we go around. Paul, good, lovely, thank you.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, machine learning and AI is very mainstream now. I'm a user of it, definitely. I am in the field of data science, but I'm not naive on these tools. It's just tools, okay? As a practitioner, I mainly focus on what are the real needs of the members of the cooperative, etc. So sometimes I'm a little bit worried about all the communication of the big corp advocacy about AI, machine learning, etc. And it can be a little bit dangerous. Again, I'm not against AI. I'm not so conservative in machine learning, and we are already starting a project now with a research center in HTech about machine learning to work on the data. So we are user of it, and we will create program, but its plan I will not develop here. But I think the main issue, the main concern, because in the cooperative, I'm working with 13 organizations now. I'm doing field evaluation. I think the main concern is the data quality, the urbanization of the information system, the level of digitalization to create good data quality and to have a good data governance policy within the organization. I think that is the main challenge for the organization. And we have certain level of data maturity or data science maturity to pass through before to jump into the machine learning AI adventure. The first one is, what data do I have? Do I able to manage it properly, ethically, taking into account do no harm policy also? I think humanitarian worker and NGO can teach a lot to the private sector on that when you see what they are doing with the AI sometimes. But again, AI, it's also something we should have in our agenda. I can see several opportunities on that, but I want really to alert the organization to really do the homework before to jump into this kind of tools, because we can have bias, misinformation, we can have data breach, problem in terms of data privacy. So you should have the skill, and I know that some of the members have dedicated resources, skilled. I think about NRC, WHH, and some are building it, like Solidarity International, Action Against Hunger. So for me, we are at the beginning of a journey in terms of data science, but first we have to start with data governance on a very ethical way.
Thank you. Diego, same question.
I would echo Paul's. I think it's very important, as the say says, garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have, or if NGOs don't have clean data and proper data, you will never get anything proper out of it. But if we think a very topical world the data is perfect, for me, the main use for AI is planning, and the capacity for organizations to be able to plan better and with very accurate, high accuracy, let's put it this way. We were discussing in the panel this morning about sustainability and how can organizations move from air to sea and better planning, and that's all about AI. It's a system that can give that level of detail and level of planning so that NGO organizations, any kind of humanitarian actor can be still extremely reactive and extremely fast, but without going into only air or only emergency, just by planning. And AI can give us that. But again, going back to Paul's say, it's about the quality of data, it's about data breaches, security, et cetera, et cetera. So first, as Paul said, just do your job, or we have to do our job to clean the data, to understand what is the data that is needed and what for, and then push the boundaries of AI to get good planning, good and accurate results.
Oh, it sounds like a really boring approach, but okay. We can't just jump into AI and play. You mean we have to actually have some level of data maturity first? I get it. Okay, that's fine.
sorry, I don't know if you have any one of you tested graphic AI. If you put garbage in the prompts, you'll get very terrible pictures. It's exactly the same. So you can go and play, absolutely. But yeah.
Thank you. I have a question from an online participant, Jeremy Robinson from Care International. Thanks for the question, Jeremy. And I think this is for you, Fabrice. Many INGOs already have invested in supply chain systems. So how would the Hulo solutions integrate with these systems like Microsoft, Coupa, SAP, Oracle, etc.? What's the we've already made these big investments, so how do we now interface with new solutions?
Depends on what system we're talking about. If we are talking about the shared resources platform, so far I don't see any Microsoft integration now. If we are talking about the procurement to pay software, so Link that was mentioned before, maybe there is a way to go for integration. So far, it's not ready yet for Microsoft integration, but it's already communicating with accountancy software. So the way is open for more integration, and the more organization we're gonna have embedded in this project, the more we're gonna have to connect with the pre-existing software area. So of course, Link must not be a standalone project, or it's going to be a failure. So we need to be open-minded too. And this is why we are working on a V2 version that will be more open than the existing one.
Great, thank you. And I guess there's the point to note of the potential for interface or interoperating rather than full integration where, yeah, super, okay. I've just been passed another question. Yeah, go on, Marie, while I'm reading this one, go ahead.
Hi, Marie, Interagency Procurement Group Coordinator. I got a question linked to the Link question just now. And I was very interested by the presentation on the FHL study on the Link version. Thanks for that. And I was wondering whether it has influenced the roadmap for the development on Link V2, or is it too soon? Because I think it's a very way to have it interfaced. So I don't know if Paul or somebody can answer on the roadmap of Link V2 or the Master Chief. Hi, Master Chief.
Please introduce yourself, Jean-Baptiste.
So I'm Jean-Baptiste, I'm the CEO of Hulo. I was not supposed to talk to this panel neither, but I'm happy to answer to your question, Marie. Yes, of course, we have done the exercise of making this assessment, FHL assessment for Link version 1 in order to know our baseline from where we stand, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses compared to FHL. And based on that, of course, it is influencing the roadmap for the version 2 because we want to increase as much as possible our compliance with the FHL. The baseline for us is to say that Link is one system among others. And it's true that the more users of Link we will have, the best it will be for the tool and its sustainability. But it will never be one tool for all the sector. And so Link has to be interoperable. Link has to be able to share data with other systems, and we have to be able to combine data from different systems to strategize our supply chains and to be able to take the best decision. So yes, it is really the aim of embedding FHL into the Link version 2 project.
Thank you. We have a question from the remote participants from Loic Manetier. Thank you for the question. He highlights that data analysis is easy to focus on in big emergencies, but what about the small emergencies or the forgotten ones, this less funded area? Is there a potential there to look at resource pooling and what data analysis can tell us in those less sizable or less significant response? I guess the question behind the question is there's a risk that we orientate ourselves in this period of experimentation towards those the areas of scale. Fabrice, would you like to take that one?
Actually, the whole Hulo project is not meant to be implemented in emergencies only. Not at all, actually. And that's the question has been oftenly asked. That's the main difference with the logistic cluster and its mandate, right? It intervenes only in emergencies. Hulo is working with private sector. Hulo is not working only where as a last resort. And Hulo is aiming is looking for efficiency. So efficiency could be found everywhere in emergencies, but also in underfunded or forgotten crisis, and mostly in forgotten crisis. What we are working on are what we call the support cost, the cost of the running cost, let's say, which are the most difficult to fund, and especially is underfunded crisis. This is where we're gonna aim for pockets of efficiency. So yes, I would. The answer to Loic's question is yes, of course, we want to work in emergency if possible. And the example I gave before with the shared resources tool, hopefully we'll use it in all emergencies, because in emergency it's always a nightmare to get the contact list to communicate with people. Hopefully it will be useful, but also in small crisis. Yeah. That's actually the best place, because you have time to set up a proper pool resources system. You have time to set up MOUs, to discuss with SQs and so on and so on. Yes, of course, this is actually that's what we aim for Hulo in terms of opening new countries. Will not be only new emergencies.
To complete a little bit yes, the first proof of concept were oriented perhaps on a big volume context, because some members, the members of the cooperative, wanted also to test a little bit the cost recovery, the return on investments, the financial savings, because it was very one of the top priority to try the model, to do the proof of concept. But at the meantime, on our first annual impact report, and we are working on the second one, we realize that sometimes to target it's not just about emergency. There is a lot of mission contests we are running out of an emergency. We are not talking about that, forgotten crisis, but emergency with CNN effects are not so develop numerous. There is a lot of countries, let's say that, like NRC last report says that among 2025 contexts were representing like 80% of the expenditure of humanitarian action. Sorry if the figures are not correct, I read it very fast. It's a very good report, but at the meantime, when you take Hulo cooperative, with our BI, we are able to see that all the members, if we cumulate, we are in around 100 countries. So it's a lot, and it means that there is 75 countries which are out of the radar. And we can see through our qualitative semi-structured interview and the qualitative data we are getting from that the small humanitarian intervention count. And there is another aspect of that the cooperative is working on is, okay, sometimes a big crisis, the NGO, they have the means, they have the money, they have the resources, and they are less perhaps willing to share. At the other side, we have some crises, like in Mozambique, like in other contexts, like the funding are decreasing, that the new way of working could be more welcome, because they are already suffering, and they are like, okay, I'm more open to share now because I don't have money anymore for my warehouse. I don't have money anymore to keep my IT manager. So it can be a joint HR initiative. So, and thanks to our last annual impact report, the Global Engagement Committee, we have a working session to think about another version of Hulo with pilot project, with a light version. Share resources is part of the strategy to have a kind of pooling without Hulo through the app, but we are thinking about other design of the project, perhaps one NGO can carry the project itself, and not to have fully dedicated Hulo staff on the field. So to answer to Loic, we are thinking about it, and we know that in our qualitative data, there is room to mutualize in this forgotten crisis, because there is a huge will on the field coming from the field.
Necessity is the mother of invention, huh? So perhaps that's the way in which we innovate in the future. A question for all the panel now. It seems like sometimes in the humanitarian sector, we're behind the curve and we jump on these boats around digitalization and innovation a little bit later than other sectors. How can we get ahead of the curve? What do you think is coming next that will be most significant? Fabrice, would you like to start?
By working together. And yeah, and globally to pull the cost of all these systems. These systems are incredibly expensive, and with Solidarité and the link that we decided to use, that's a very good example between what I spend every year for link compared to what I would have spent using whatever Dynamics or SAP. Yeah, so that's one way. That's one answer.
Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's difficult because I think we're going to be behind the curve for a long time now, because we have been for a long time. So what we need, and I was discussing this in some meetings today, is a long-term strategy to get out of it, and a plan, and not to expect to suddenly have everything up and running, in a year or two. And also, as I was saying before, there's a lot of need to let people understand the benefits and the advantages and speak in clear language about this, but then also manage expectations. So because it will take a while.
And maybe just to stay with you for a minute. So you mentioned about the complexities that we still suffer from not quite knowing where to place some of these things, and not knowing which meetings to place the discussions in, not knowing which boxes to place the funding in. How do we solve that problem? Because it's been there for a while.
I mean, it's the easy answer, but I mean, we have to talk about it enough. I mean, we have to have dedicated discussions on this, and I mean, it's also up to our senior colleagues to recognize the importance. And okay, we can go so far to bring it to their attention, but also, I mean, there are ways to do this as well. I think one that we've been using with some success is again making the comparison to the private sector. In private sector boardrooms, if borrowing some language from Cecile, who is in the room, if the supply chain is your biggest spend, and actually in many cases, the biggest area of risk as well, then why is it not at the top of the agenda? Why is it not being planned, thought about, supported, in a more substantive way? I think it's a very easy case to make, but we just need to continue to try and find the right language and push on all fronts. This is something we had in DG ECHO a couple of years ago when we started looking at the logistics policy. It was okay, should we do funding? Should we talk to the field? Should we get our regional field colleagues to buy in? Should we, and the answer was everything, but a little bit at a time in a kind of concerted effort, because people have to really believe in it. And also DG ECHO's single form, which, okay, I've been told it's maybe, not the most burdensome, but it's still, partners have to fit it in. We do ask for some information on this. We've looked at doing key performance indicators. It's something that we should explore. But if people don't believe that doing this is useful, and that goes for especially for ECHO, because if our field colleagues have another box to tick and they don't understand what's behind it, then there's a large possibility that it might not be so diligently enforced. So it's really about taking people on that journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I think we're all preaching to the choir probably in this room on that topic, but it's not seen as that lever to deliver the mission of our organizations. And I think that's probably one of the key differences in the commercial space. Marie, did you have a question?
It's related to the funding and everything. So we've been asked over the past 15 years to always do better with less, pooling resources, training procurement, and so on. based on my experience with Solidarité Internationale, the projects we have been implementing in countries are grown bigger and bigger with less and less resources when it comes to support costs and support HR. Now with Hulo joint procurement, we are able to do savings, which is amazing, allowing to do better, well, no, to do more for the beneficiaries. However, it's consuming HR. What ideas do you have? And maybe my question is more at Richard and Diego. What ideas would you have to enable savings made to be reallocated to the support cost? Not saying that it's because it's us, the procurement function, that are doing the savings that we need to benefit from it. Not thinking that. But however, if we're not there doing the savings, they're not made. So how can we share the cake and not think that we should not give it to the beneficiaries, but however, we need to function at some point. So we need, do you have ideas?
So just to clarify a bit, because I think some of this was covered in earlier discussion. So one of the challenges in the model at the moment of collaboration is that when cost savings are achieved in a project or a program in a country, that money is then not free for the organization to choose how they reinvest it. So Mary's question is about how do we address this? How do we collectively find a solution whereby that money can be reinvested to support these collaborative activities?
So apologies to Richard first. For me, the answer is really simple. It's about flexible funding. As simple as that. A lot of, and you have, of course, much more experience than what we have in academia. The funding is bounded to specific things, specific missions, specific countries, and if the money is not expended, that's done. That you cannot use it anywhere because it's earmarked. If that funding is flexible, is non-earmarked, then you could do whatever with that. And some organizations that have more private funding that is not earmarked could do more things because they are free to do it. So that's why I apologize to Richard, but just to defend him as well, it's not the donor's fault. This is policy making level. So I'll leave it there. Richard, please.
No, thank you. I mean, I've had some practice at this question, so it's not so shocking for me. Look, I mean, fundamentally, from a public spending perspective, you can't. I mean, you can't say we cost this for this amount, and if we save something, then that goes, somewhere else back in, because from a public finance perspective, that means you didn't do the right cost at the beginning. I mean, that's just how it works, legally, financially. But I think this does not exclude at all what Diego is saying. And this goes back again to people understanding the benefits, and that if they do this and work collaboratively, and there's good data proving it, that is well presented, that people understand, okay, this will lead to these benefits. But it's difficult because we're people. I mean, we have, and this came up as well today. There's a big fundamental psychological barrier when you're saying, well, okay, we have this pot of money and we don't have enough money, and these people need medicine, or we could fund collaborative working, which eventually, in a much more abstract way, may actually help more people in the long run. But how on earth do you quantify that? How do you present that as? So it's really tricky, but in a way, it's also helpful because, I mean, the whole. It means that the understanding really has to be meaningful and substantive of why organizations are doing this, which means we have to do it the long way around, which is explaining to everyone why we're doing this, getting everyone on board and so on, which ultimately should be more beneficial to the community as a whole. But it's really hard work. So, I mean, that's.
I counted like 4 ultimately's there. I think we're in trouble.
Sorry, but just one, because actually on the flexible funding, this is a good point. And this is what came up in the EHF as well. It was also mentioned by the leaders talking about it there. And there are mechanisms. I mean, ECHO has programmatic partnerships, which was raised during this discussion, where, like the grand bargain, there's a quid pro quo where, okay, less earmarking, but with a larger multi-annual flexible pot of funding, there is perhaps a thematic approach of this will be used to improve the preparedness planning of the supply chain, and it could be regional, it could be on a particular thematic area of the supply chain or digitization. But then that requires these big conversations to happen for owners and partners to come together and say, okay, well, we think this is worth going and agreeing and actually that it's well. A big amount, is it? No, it's good. Yeah, but if you're going to put quite a few poker chips on that, because at the end of the day, that's another thing that we face with this kind of funding is, ultimately some of these solutions could fail, and that's something we have to be prepared to face. But then we really have to do the homework to make sure we give it our best shot. So yeah.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we've seen that evolution programmatically, and I'm not picking on you as a donor representative, but in the broader donor community, we've seen that evolution programmatically, whereby evolution of program design has become the norm. So you can start a program and say, actually, now we've figured out that this is what we need, and this has changed, or this context has changed. And most of the major institutional donors will now say, yes, great, do a better program. Adjust, adapt, tell us what's happening, and let's reformat that. And yet operationally, we can't tolerate the same kind of flux or change within a cost savings environment, within operating differently. It feels to me like maybe that's the paradigm shift that has to happen, that we recognize that the change in modality operationally is just as valuable as that change in programmatic delivery.
Yeah, agree.
Fine. I'm not in the panel. Right. Any other questions from the room? Maxence has his finger on the button.
Yeah, not that much a question, but more like I was thinking on after Fabrice's presentation on the shared resources tool, and I was trying to find other benefits as well. And I'm thinking that what I can see in HI, Maxence Giraud, and the logistic director at HI, and part of Hulo, and I was thinking that I'm facing logistic coordinators that are less and less coordinating with other organizations. And I think I'm a strong believer in human relationships, so I don't think a tool will solve everything. But this tool will put people together, will bring them together, and I think this is another benefit. And something else as well I was thinking about is the fact that we've been sharing resources in the past, offices, fleets, but we were never able to demonstrate the added value of it. And I think with this tool, we'll have data and we'll be able to show it to everyone that this is another added value of logistics. And then we can probably ask for more money and struggle less with budgeting logistic resources. Also.
Yeah, thanks, Maxence. Any other comments or questions from the room? Neil?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fascinating discussion. I think when it comes to investments in systems and data and analytics, a lot comes down to what are the incentives of doing it, right? And how can you capitalize those costs when you're working on short-term grant funding modalities? I mean, I love these program partnership, opportunities, etc. But that isn't going to be very scalable because it's only going to benefit a few of the more resourced agencies, in fact, to get even better because they have the resources to engage in those mechanisms and to benefit from them. So it seems like we're in a bit of a catch-22 situation where we understand that the path towards optimization and efficiency is through better usage of data and systems. And I mean, just to go on a slight tangent with that, I think all of us have also been spending a lot of time trying to improve the standards of supply chain professionalization in the sector, right? And we've invested massive amounts over the years of time and energy and resources as well. However, the beauty of these modern systems is it takes a lot of that advanced supply chain, understanding out of the equation because you can get the machine to do it for you, whether it comes to quantification, forecasting, demand planning, supply planning, network optimization. So we can, in fact, catch up much quicker to what the private sector has been doing, for example, right? but it's going to involve some creative thinking around how do we do that upfront investment in a manner that can be available freely to all humanitarian actors, because we don't want to get into a further cycle of competition, right? I'm just giving a preview of some of my comments tomorrow in the session on climate as well. But I'm happy that we are discussing these topics more and more nowadays. So thanks to Richard, of course, and ECHO, because they've created that platform to have these kind of discussions.
And thank you. I mean, just to respond, I mean, maybe I sounded a little bit too closed in my previous intervention, but we're still in a reflection phase, and we're not sure what the best tools are. We know that there needs to be more investment in digital tools, in digital solutions. We all know the parameters and limitations that we're all under, but there are multiple different avenues, and I think there will be, as with so many of these things, no one solution. I mean, one thing that we've been talking about for a little while is whether in the country support costs there might be some kind of element of support to broader digital tools or so on. And in any kind of discussion we have about bigger approaches, or when we're thinking about funding larger partners, it's a reflex for us to ask, okay, and how does this benefit smaller providers as well? How does this open up the possibilities? So we'll continue to have that reflex. But yeah, it's important that you raise it. Thank you.
Great points. Thank you very much. Yeah, Bassam, I think we'll make this the last comment.
Yeah.
No pressure, but make it good.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a different perspective, but I want to challenge ourselves a little bit as well. Do we all need to digitize? Is the objective digitization, or is the objective getting the data, knowing what we have and what we don't have and where it is? That's something that we and NRC struggled with for quite a long time. And it's only until recently that we realized, actually, what we need is the data. And in many cases, we don't need to digitize to get the data. We just need the process in place, because the scale of what we need to get the data is very small. So therefore, the process to get the data is minimal. You just make sure you tick a couple of boxes, you write a couple of names, and you put it on a SharePoint site, and that's it. And then once you aggregate that to 30 countries, you have a global view with very minimal effort. We don't need to go and build a digital system to achieve that. Right? That's one end of the spectrum. But then the other end of the spectrum is understanding as well what kind of scalability we are looking for. Like when we want to scale up a process over thousands of times in let's say in a month, I want to do something 200 times. Is it efficient to do it manually? Or maybe now digitization is the goal. So I think trying to understand where in that spectrum we fall, each organization, is really important, because that's a big spectrum. And within the same organization, that spectrum exists for each process. For some processes, you need digitization. For other processes, you don't within the same organization. So really, I want to challenge ourselves to really try to understand, what we're trying to solve here, because I feel maybe sometimes we focus too much on the big bang, rather on the journey of 1,000 miles, starting with one step, and let's take one step at a time, try solve one process, and then build on it and build on it and build on it, to eventually, maybe in 10 years, we get to a point where we can cover all of our supply chain. So that to me is really important, because when we start to build supply chain solutions, digital solutions, ERP solutions, very quickly it becomes a big monster, an expensive monster. One, to develop, but two, once it's been developed, to roll it out. The change management is very complex and very expensive. And then once it's been rolled out, to maintain it, right? Like security standards change. new business needs arise. So you not only need to maintain it, but you need to also update it. That's very expensive. So I challenge us, are we an effective aid solution if we have these big, expensive digital ERPs that we have to constantly maintain? Is that what we're going for, Richard? Or is how much is the per service to the beneficiary costing us as taxpayers and costing us as organizations, but also as a donor community, right? So we need to balance these perspectives, right? We need to find the way to develop digital solutions that enables us to scale up while also keeping us very lean financially, but while also that we, in terms of a solution that we can introduce, we need to be able to scale that up very quickly and scale down very quickly. When we're closing down, how cheap and simple it is for me to just turn it off, right? If it's not, are we achieving our goals? So I think there's an element of not really starting from square one, but rather asking ourselves, what are some of the key principles as a sector that we want to achieve when it comes to modernization, when it comes to digitization? Can we at least agree on some of the key principles? Should cheap to operate be a key element? Should easy to scale up and down be a key element? Should easy to use by the guy in South Sudan who really is almost illiterate or has terrible internet be key elements for us? Like, where are some of the some common objectives in the digitization that we as a community need to achieve together? I feel that's not part of the conversation today. We just develop something. So a point of reflection for us as a community.
Yeah, a really interesting one. And I think that it's so tempting to enter into solutions without being clear on the why, and that why can be different for every organization. I think the role of shared tools has to be one which has a clear why for everybody who wants to benefit from that. But any comments from the panel on reflections on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, just I think to say I think these should be discussed. The fact that it's not discussed yet at high level, and it would be interesting. I don't know, if people feel that their executive management teams have reflected on this or how much they've been involved in these kinds of discussions, because I think it's at this level that some of these discussions have to happen. Words. I mean, it's something that we've come up against things in the past on cash, for example, where there has needed to be a whole community conversation about how we do it, because if you get it wrong, it can be really bad, and there will be people, ultimately beneficiaries, that suffer from these decisions. So there's a burden of responsibility to actually have this conversation.
Well, I'm conscious of the time and promising that I would release you to your evenings or rest of the day for those of us joining different times of the world. So just a couple of reflections to round up what we've been talking about. We've talked a little bit today about the funding gap. I believe it was mentioned once or twice. And, there is this responsibility on all of us as international humanitarian organizations to do our best with the funding that we have and to act as efficiently as possible and effectively as possible within that funding means. But I feel like digitalization wise, it's really tricky to say, we need to change the word, but digitally we're kind of at a crossroads. And I feel like that crossroads is one where we must consciously make a decision. Do we want to move forward individually? Do we want to stagnate and effectively move backwards? Do we want to move forward collectively? And in which case we need to set those parameters as to what makes sense and what adds value for all of us. But there is that conscious decision to do nothing is still a decision that we need to take. So I think we're at a bit of a crossroads, and maybe there are more conversations that need to happen in the sector. I like pictures. You've probably noticed that now. But I think one of the things and one of the reasons that I put this in is that some things that we are extremely prohibitively expensive, like digital investments, cannot be done individually and should not be done individually. So maybe there is a space for us to come together and to try and do the impossible or to overcome these digital hurdles and collaborate more effectively going forward. I think there's a huge potential there. I think we're starting to edge into that space with some of the solutions we've discussed today, but there's a lot more that we could be doing to be more effective. And finally, I wanted to finish on that tension that I think a few colleagues mentioned today. I promised you boats, Richard. So why am I showing you boats? One of the things that's really challenging is that we consider our funding in the same pot at the moment. So our funding for the delivery of aid and delivery of impact and impact for beneficiaries, if we take some of that away to invest in something in the supply chain, it's a really difficult decision to make because we consider it in the same space. And maybe we need to separate those pots and say, do you know what? Yes, I could throw more people into a lifeboat right now and save more lives today. But if I invested in a better lifeboat, then where would that get us in a few years' time? And that's one of the hardest decisions, I think, facing us, and an interesting reflection that has come up from this conversation today, ethically and in that tension point of our organizational strategies. How do we make those choices? So I just want to thank all of the panelists. Thank you for your insights and for joining us today. Thank you for everybody in the room and online. It's been a very well attended session online, and really interesting discussions. So thank you and have a lovely evening.
Good questions. Thanks.